Hello and welcome to the 2019 FIA Certified Gran Turismo Championships. It is the top 16 superstars. We're focusing on the European region and looking at the Nations Cup race. This is going to be an absolute thriller. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tom Brooks. Alongside me, Jimmy Broadbent. We're here to guide you through the action. We know how competitive the European region is, Jimmy. We know how aggressive they have been in certain circumstances in World Tour events and in top 16 superstar events in events gone by. So what are we expecting for this one?
Hard to say. These guys always put on a good show, though. It's always very close at the top, so I'm sure the racing today will reflect that.
Absolutely right. Well, let's have a look at the point standings then, shall we, going into this event after 7 rounds of the top 16 superstars. You can see that RC Miura lead the way. That is Ryan Derouche, the French driver. TRL Lightning, otherwise known as Mick Hizal, if you've been following the World Tour events, he's there in 2nd position, but not too far away in the overall point standings. Likewise, TRL Susu, Williams Koke, and Williams Adams 41, not too far away either, all within 100 points of one another. So very much a good opportunity here for things to be turned on their head.
And what that basically means is a good result for some of our guys can very easily mean a trip to the top of the points ranking. But having our top 8 drivers separated by 150 points, then we go back down to 9th to 16th. You can see Williams Gio there. I'm fairly sure that's Giorgio Mangano. A different name. He's now racing for the Williams team. He's ahead of Rick 918's BMX, and of course TRL Manu Rodri, who we've seen quite a few times at the World Tour event. So very close in the top 16, everything still to play for.
Yeah, absolutely right, as you say there, Jimmy. So let's find out a little bit more about the circuit that we're going to be competing on. It is the Autopolis International Racing Course. You can see over here it is based in Japan, 4.6 kilometers long, very new to Gran Turismo sport as well, and a very big mixture of different corners, some fast, some flowing, very tight and twisty though, limited overtaking opportunities as well.
Yeah, a couple of tight corners there as well. T6 and T10 come to mind. Of course, bear in mind that these guys tend to not run traction control in the cars. We'll get into the cars in a minute. So having a nice, easy right foot will like to see your tyres do a bit better. Overtaking opportunities on this track down at T1 and T10. Of course, these being downforce cars we're driving, which again we'll get into in a second. It's very important to be close to the end of a straight. Following through the fast corners like T8 is often fairly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, let's get ready then to go qualifying, shall we, and see how the drivers will line up on the grid. So you join us at the end of the first lap of the European region. It is, of course, the Nations Cup, as we say. A 10-minute qualifying session for these drivers. Here is Rick 918 BMX in the Honda NSX machine, and the Honda NSX, Jimmy, has actually proved to be very, very popular amongst a lot of drivers here in the Nations Cup for this race.
Yeah, I think they've only got 2 GTRs in the European region here, so the Honda definitely the car to pick. Rick 918 BMX agreeing with that, it seems. He's coming around now. He'll be our first driver to set a flying lap. Now, in terms of lap time, we expect the pole time to be somewhere in the 33s, so anywhere in there is fairly handy. A 34 will be decent for the top half of the grid. Anything lower than that, you'll be looking a bit further down. So what can Rick do? Rick comes across the line, 134.4, so quite an average time, really, quite middling, I'd say. That will see him probably around 7th or 8th position if everyone else is similar. Let's see what BSR MX Steve can do there in the NSX as well.
Easy name to pronounce that, isn't it?
It's very difficult when you've got a lisp, Tom, right?
What about Williams Adam 41 then, otherwise known as Adam Toswillo to you and I as well? He comes over the timing line and he goes up to, start his first flying lap, actually, as it turns out.
So yeah, a couple of these guys still on outlaps. I think Kitso is actually on a flyer. Let's see what he can do. Comes across the line. 135.1, that will not be good enough for a pole position. Here comes Pirata, the Italian driver there. Haven't seen his name much recently, so it'll be good to see what he has in store for this session. Well, there you go, he comes in and very quickly goes fast. It's a 134.0, so just knocking on the doors of the 33s there. Here comes RC Miura, definitely on a cruising outlap. You can tell by the way the engine is pretty much banging against the relative down the straight. Same with Giorgio Mangano. They have set times, but they aren't times that are going to be representative of their true pace.
Yeah, all these drivers, of course, want to get as light a car as possible. They started off with 100 litres of fuel at the beginning of the qualifying session, and they're going to want to get that car, as we said, as light as possible, which is why you're seeing drivers like TRL Susu here, who is 3rd in the standings going into this event. He's going to want to get that car with as least fuel on it as possible, a new set of boots on it, and then he'll set a Banzai lap in theory at the end of this session. Just 10 minutes this qualifying session, so they're going to be running out of time here. everybody getting in those slow laps. You can see the TRL Manu Rodri there just behind his fellow Team Redline teammate TRL Lightning, the German driver. We ride on board with him, and you can just see how he's doing that as well. He's coasting, he's on the throttle, he's on the brakes, he's in first gear, revving the absolute balls off the engine. Pistons will be flying out, and valves and everything if you were doing this in real life. Fortunately, mechanical sympathy isn't necessarily needed in GT Sport.
Yeah, luckily not. I mean, we kind of touched on this before off screen, but saying that, Adam Siswillo there goes up into second place, a 1:24.1 for him, so not a bad time at all. It's not really ideal to have players doing this, I think, driving around, buzzing off the rev limiter all the way around. I think it's the much easier solution is just give the players the opportunity to put as much or as little fuel, in this case, in the car as possible, and then go for the flying lap, as opposed to going around having to burn off the fuel. Or, as Tom suggested, actually, off camera, a super pole maybe would be a good idea.
Absolutely, I think that would be fantastic. I used to love the old one-lap qualifying sessions in Formula 1. I know it wasn't everybody's favourite way to do things, but I think it does reward the driver who can get the maximum out of a lap, keep it on the limit, but also not go off the circuit as well. So many different strategies that you can see with different drivers when they end up a bit further down the order of the grid than they would like to.
Well, we're just saying that so we can go home early.
Yeah, that's also true.
That's a session. So Pirata then doing what we said before, just burning off that fuel. So the reason for that, if you're wondering why they're doing it, is because at the start of each session the player is forced to take 100 litres of fuel around, which the car's going to be very heavy. I think that's around 80 kilos or so of extra weight, something like that.
85 actually.
85 kilos, yeah.
We did a quick Google on that.
We're prepared this time, aren't we? About 85 kilos or so, and obviously that burns off over the course of the qualifying session, so having a lighter car means a faster car. Nice and easy to understand that, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. Much easier than trying to work out the difference between 100 litres and the difference in kilograms. All these drivers, of course, on racing soft tyres at the moment as well. They've got an option of racing soft and racing medium tyres here at the Autopolis International Racecourse. And of course, the soft tyres, faster tyres, they're going to be racing on those, or at least qualifying on those. Whether they decide to race on those, an entirely different kettle of fish. We'll talk more about strategy after this qualifying session and look and see what the drivers are going to be doing during race conditions. Here's BSR MX Steve, we'll just probably call him BSR Steve from now on, the Belgian driver, just going through into the fast and flowing final right-hander before he flicks it left and onto that start-finish straight. What is he going to be able to do? Well, it's of course a pit stop for him after this in-lap, and he'll put some new boots on his car, and then the drivers will be going out for that final flying lap in this session. This is where it gets very interesting indeed.
So of course one of the downsides of doing this, though, is that if you mess up your final lap, then you are starting down the field. I mean, look what we have right now. We have names like Williams Gio, we have Manu Rodri, we have TRL Lightning, of course, down there as well, all with times that are nowhere near representative of their pace, but if they mess up their next lap, that's what their qualifying time would be. So it's a bit of a risky strategy, that one, but just shows the confidence of the drivers, if nothing else.
Yeah, it certainly does. You're looking at Williams Adam here, beautiful livery on that car as well. I have to say that is one of my favourite designs I've ever seen in GT Sport. It works very well with the lovely lines of that Honda NSX machine. Just flicking it into the left-hander here now as we flick over to TRL Lightning. An interesting design of livery that he's got on his Team Redline car as well.
Yeah, interesting to see him not running the Redline livery, but he's very much a Redline member. He comes down the hill now. I think he's just doing his outlap at the moment, so his next lap should be the flyer. He's still burning off a bit of fuel, you can tell by how slow he's going right now, and just trying to make sure he's not in the way of those behind who maybe are on a hot lap. You can see where everyone is on track by looking at the track map there in the top right-hand corner. Very handy for us as commentators too, very handy for the players. I think it looks like TRL Lightning's now starting to actually wind it up a little bit now and get ready for his flying lap, and we'll see what the German driver can do. Of course, runner-up last year in the GT Nations Cup final, runner-up in Paris as well. He's I think he's done it all but won it, unfortunately. He's a European champion, but that's about as far as he's gone, but he knows he can do better. Let's see how he does here in qualifying. Yeah, absolutely. TRL Lightning, we know he's a very, very fast driver indeed. And I tell you what, after the World Tour event, he was stood there on the podium with a face looking like you're trying to sell him double glazing. He wasn't very happy in any way, shape or form after that one. It was a mistake that sadly cost him victory. It's just a sign of a competitive driver there, Tom, isn't it? He knows he can do better, and if you know you can do something well and you don't do it well, it can be very frustrating. But we won't go into that too much more. We'll instead look at his qualifying lap, coming down to the hairpin at the bottom here. Very important to get run out of here. Watch his throttle input. Glance it on exit. He's got a little bit. He goes, you know what? These tyres work. Smash. And and that's the end of that. So a great exit there for TRL Lightning, coming around now up to one of the overtaking spots in this corner, on this track, sorry, T10. Very tricky corner this, because it kind of falls away from you. You pull to the inside here, as you can see, and the track just falls off to the right. It's very easy to understeer off if you're a little bit too enthusiastic, but what does TRL Lightning do to counteract that? Just hits the throttle, oversteer instead. Now we go down to the bottom of the circuit, two fast right-handed. The first one is faster than the second. Off throttle a bit now, and now you want to start preparing the car for this very difficult section up here. This right-hander up here is very late apex. They go put it back in, touch the curb on the right, try and straight line it a couple of times coming in too as well. Kipso coming up into third position on a 34.3. Next across the line will be RC Mura, so he comes across the line. No, it's Susu, sorry, he does a 133.3. What a lap from Susu. Can TRL Lightning beat that? Be Ridge on board for most of the lap with him. He does, a 133.1. He nearly goes into the 32s. Wow!
That is an incredible lap there from TRL Lightning running the checkered flag. Williams Adam also improves up to third position at the death of that session, so a second row start at the moment for the British driver, and TRL Manu Rodri as well goes up onto the second row of the grid, so the Spaniard gets himself up the order as well. Look at the difference of nationalities up and down the grid. Firestorm with a great end to that session, a 133.753 for him, puts him inside the top 5 as well. Brilliant. And Williams Koke from nowhere as well. The Spanish driver does an absolutely brilliant job to get himself on that second row of the grid with his fellow teammate. But there is the standings after that session. TRL Lightning, TRL Susu leading the way to the two Team Redline teammates ahead of the two Williams teammates in third and fourth. Then TRL Manu Rodri, Firestorm, Rick 918 BMX and RC Mura in seventh and eighth position. A good end to the session for those guys. Pirato, of course, led early doors, sadly down in ninth position ahead of Jim. TX3 Kipso, as well as SRC SVDR in 12th position, BSR Steve and Williams Gio, who of course is Giorgio Mangano right at the back of the grid there, Jimmy. Work for him to be doing in the race, and this is how the race will line up for these drivers. 11 laps, 51.4 kilometres, 3 times fuel consumption, 9 times tyre wear as well.
Tyre wear going to be a big factor here today. Here is the tyre strategy as we think it will work, of course. We've been wrong before many times, but we'll go over it anyway. Racing soft tyre we think is good for about 6 laps or so. That's when it starts to fall off in terms of performance. We have seen other people try and no-stop this race before, so that could be a possibility. And of course the racing medium tyre there as well, working out a little bit longer, but it is a little bit slower over the course of a lap. Now if you do choose to pit, you're going to lose about 14 seconds or so, maybe a little bit more getting back up to speed, so it's really up to the driver to decide what is the best course of action.
Absolutely right. Let's keep an eye and see what the strategies are going to be for these different drivers. 1.2 seconds a lap slower is that racing medium tyre, so will any driver start on that? Will they pit? Will they not pit? Let's wait and find out as we go ready to go to the grid and start the race. The cars depart from their positions then, ready for the rolling start of round 8 of the top 16 superstars. The European Region Nations Cup race about to get underway. And this man here, the fast German Michael Hezal, TRL Lightning, as you can see him on screen, is going to lead the field over the line as the race gets underway. It's not going to be a particularly exciting first corner, I'm sure, with this rolling start, but it will be interesting to see how they all fare after the first couple of laps or so. TRL Lightning leads his teammate TRL Susu from first position. Then comes the two Williams teammates, and already you can see a bit of a slip and a slide there for TRL Manu Rodri. He was getting out of shape out of that first corner there, Jimmy. What do we think about that? Cold tyres, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, everyone just trying to get the best run out of T1 possible at this point. Of course, it's just to really follow the leader through the first part of the course until everyone starts to find their groove. Right now, it's a red line car from a red line car from a Williams car from a Williams car. So good to see some team rivalry there going on. I'm sure they're maybe having a little chat with each other as the race goes on. Not unusual for that to happen. So right now, TRL Lightning putting a little bit of a lead over his teammate, up to half a second now as he come up to T10. Great overtaking spot this if you are close enough. No one is right now, but for now, Lightning leads the pack around.
Yeah, nice to see Williams at the sharp end of the grid for probably the only time this season as well. It's very exciting to see Williams Koke and Williams Adam there doing a really good job behind the wheel of their Honda NSXs so far. You can see how they are trying to close that gap to TRL Susu. This is going to be interesting in terms of strategy in this race as well. We've seen in other regions just how different it can be in these different regions for these drivers. and what sort of strategies they opt to go for, whether they will be pitting earlier on, whether they'll be pitting a little bit later, whether they'll be pitting at all, of course, is the question mark. Let's wait and see what will happen. But Williams Koke there in third position. What is his strategy going to be at the moment? He's stuck behind TRL Susu at the moment, but he's got his very quick Williams teammate breathing down his neck as well.
Yep, keep an eye on that, of course. There will be a little bit of an uneasiness between them because they are teammates and there'll be no silly moves between the two. But of course, in the background, Manu Rodri there, of a red line driver, so he's looking to try and put the pressure on to help his teammates a bit higher up the field, I'm sure, as well. Firestorm behind him in sixth. We don't really see many Swedish drivers in the European region, so it's good to see one of them being represented well here by Firestorm. Again, as we said, a lot of people opting to drive the NSX around here. It just seems the GTR doesn't quite have the same dominance at this circuit as the NSX does, and there is one of our lone GTRs, SRC SVDR, in the GTR. Is a mouthful.
It certainly is, yeah, the Polish driver there behind the wheel of that machine. Oh, bit of a slip and a slide there for TX3 Kipso just in front. He goes off the track, manages to gather it up without losing too much time, but has actually been given a penalty of 0.5 of a second, which he'll serve as soon as he comes. In fact, no, he won't serve it. It was a bit too after the penalty information, so he'll serve it on the next lap round, actually, with TX3 Kipso. But arguably, though, that is not what he wanted to do, and he's under pressure from behind as well.
Looks like that Swillow is starting to drop off the back of the top three here, just a little bit. Williams Koke there, right on the back of Tsutsu in front. Meanwhile, looking back from TRL Lightning. Great view there, so you get a really an idea of how the cars concertina into the corners, then expand out again once they get back onto the power. And you get an idea of that long right hand. It really hurts the front left tyre around there if you're not careful. Of course, the driver has a little bit of a say over how much lock he puts on. So we're getting to the stage now where drivers will be starting to think about what their strategy is going to be. We tend to see laps, well, I imagine we see a stop anywhere between lap 4 and lap 6, maybe, end of lap 6, I should say. So,
whoa,
who was that in the background?
That was Firestorm, was it? Yeah, it was, having a bit of a slide out of the first corner. Not the first time we've seen that either.
I've just noticed, Tom, that TRL Manu Rodri is at the back of the field. So that must have been a mistake somewhere for the Spanish driver. There he is. So he was in 5th position. Now he's gone down to last. So he must have spun somewhere. Let's have a look if it was on last lap. His last lap, I can't even see him on the live timing because he's so far back now. But he must have spun last lap.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, that is a really phenomenal feast for TRL Lightning, isn't it, as well? Contrasting fortunes to the extreme. And yeah, he had a 147.3 last time around at TRL Manu Rodri. So big disappointment there. We didn't see what happened. Hopefully we'll get a replay of the action afterwards, but still disappointing way for his race to come undone, really. Just a couple of laps in.
Yep, easy mistake to make there around here. These cars are very fast, over 500 brake horsepower underneath your right foot, and of course they don't run traction control on these things, so it's a bit quicker to not do that, which means that if you do get a little bit enthusiastic on the louder pedal, then you might end up looking at the other guys backwards as you spin through the next corner. Don't be doing that if you can help it. Anyway, on board now with the leading Williams car, Koke Lopez coming through the long right-hander again. Looks like everyone is just very content to follow each other at this stage. Of course, the big challenge in these cars is getting close to each other because of the downforce these things produce. It means your best overtaking spot is probably down here at T1 with the sim screen, but not close enough to do that at the moment. Yeah, the dirty air is very effective on these cars, and you can see how much input Williams Koke is having to put into that those front tyres on his Honda NSX, just try and keep things on the straight and narrow. Through the right-hander he goes. This is where it begins to tighten up in that midfield section with Williams Koke. Through into the left-hander, then hard on the brakes into the hairpin which follows. Downforce working well there to try and keep the car on the straight and narrow. And then you get it, of course, into the never-ending left-hander, that never-ending right-hander at the end of the lap, of course, the converse of this corner effectively. Yep, just keeping an eye on Adam Swillow. He's just dropping back. He hasn't quite got the pace of the top 3 right now, which he'll be frustrated with. Adam is someone who was really very strong last year through the Nations Cup, and also I think in the Manufacturers Series as well. But at the live events, didn't quite have that same edge, did he? Like he just seemed to not have the same dominance he had there. Yeah, wheels seem to come off his wagon a little bit when he gets to the live events, doesn't it, for Adam Swillow? It's disappointing, really, because disappointing for himself more than anything, because we know how quick Adam can be, and on his day he is one of the fastest drivers out there. But sadly, it's not proven to go his way so far this year. Hopefully he can turn things around in not only future World Tour events, but also in the top 16 Superstars. 4th position currently wouldn't be a bad result, but he'd love to get himself on the podium and be consistently fighting for those race victories. If you ain't first, you're last. Absolutely. As Ricky Bobby, was that Ricky Bobby who said that quote? It probably was, wasn't it?
Yeah, Talladega Nights coming back as well. Here's Parata, who we saw, of course, leading in the early stages of that qualifying session early on. Williams Koke, meanwhile, has been the first driver out of the front runners to blink here, Jimmy, as well. RC Miura, the leader currently in the standings, has also come into the pit lane.
This is actually good for Coque Lopez. He's kind of called the bluff of the rest. You know what, I'm going to pit now. What that means is he's going to have the undercut. His tyres are going to be better on this outlap than the competitors around him who are suffering with an older compound of tyre. And give you an idea of lap times right now, the leader's lap time, the fastest lap of the last lap, but is a 1:35.3 on this worn soft compound. So when we get a lap time from Coque Lopez when he comes back round again next lap, we'll see how that compares.
Yeah, absolutely right. Looking back, though, at this battle now for 5th position, you can see how Parata is closing up onto the back of Rick 918 BMX. Is he going to be able to find a way through? Well, he's not quite close enough at the moment to be launching a bit of a move here. You can see the Williams livery adorning his car there as well as he comes through that turn 10 hairpin just before the penalty zone. You'll see the 2 yellow markers. There they are at the side of the circuit. Of course, it's where drivers will serve their penalties, and we've seen a couple of those given out so far here at this circuit today. So here is Williams Koke then, soft tyres, new rubber on his car, no fuel in it as well. He's got Tyrrell Rodri, who of course had that drama in the early stages on lap 2 where he had an incident that we didn't see on screen. Now Williams Koke needs to get himself ahead, and that's not really what he needs on his outlap. He needs to have clear track more than anything to try and set those fast lap times. Being stuck behind a car, being stuck behind the dirty air of a car that's not going anywhere near as fast as you are is far from ideal. And Tyrrell Rodri making a bit of a rod for his own back there, bit of a slip and a slide, and going off the circuit as Tyrrell Susu and Williams Adam now in the pits.
It did hold up Lopez though on his undercut lap, so there you go. Maybe there's a little bit going on there, but we won't dive into that too deep. Don't know what we'll find. But a lot of the field coming in now, Tom.
Yeah, lots of drivers in the pits there, Jimmy, as you say. Exactly right, all of them with varying degrees of fuel. Here comes Williams Koke though, and he has done an absolutely brilliant job with the undercut there. It still worked pretty effectively. He's gotten himself ahead of the man who was originally in second place, Tyrrell Susu, so it's worked very nicely for the Spaniard here.
Interesting to see our leader still hasn't come in yet. I would have expected him with the rest of the field at the moment, but he seems content just to drive around there on his own right now. The gap to the first person who stopped is Coque Lopez, and it's roughly 16 seconds, so it's
it was about 14 seconds for a pit stop, isn't it?
Yeah, so it will be very close if he does decide to come in.
Yeah, 14 seconds for a pit stop, but he's going to be hemorrhaging time now. He's coming to really the end of the crucial operating window of that medium compound of tyre, so if he's able to keep himself calm and smooth towards the end of this race, as we know is so characteristic with Mick Hazal's driving style, he could do it. He could be in contention here, but it just remains to be seen. We ride on board now, and this is what I was talking about, how smooth his driving style is. But I just don't know if it's going to be possible. He's flicking it through the left-hander here. Again, one turn of the wheel, so smooth, like watching a knife through butter, really, more than anything, is Tyrrell lining at the moment. But I just don't know if he's going to have the time in hand, the pace in hand, to be able to run that to the end of the race. If he doesn't pit, he's too late, surely, now, for that to be an effective window.
I think he might be trying to go to the end of this. He must be. At this point, coming in now would be just a waste, as you said. So let's see how smooth Tyrrell Lightning can be and whether he'll have the pace at the end to defend from people if he gets caught. He's got a big gap, though. That's the thing. The gap is quite big. Even the next car behind him is 7 seconds back, and that is someone else who hasn't made a pit stop as of yet. But even Firestorm's actually not too far ahead of Parata in third either. So there are close gaps all up and down the field.
Yeah, those guys both having not pitted. Everybody else up and down the field, aside from TS3 Kipso, who was just in the pit lane now, as a matter of fact, have pitted. So only 3 drivers who are now in the top 3 positions in this race have not made a stop onto new rubber. You can see Parata there sliding all over the place. His tyres very much past their best. And of course, he's stuck in the dirty air of that car, the Firestorm, in front of him as well. And you can see them as well, just scrabbling for grip, trying to find a way to get that power down.
It's very difficult in these things. As I said, no traction control, and as those tyres go off as well, that just gets more and more difficult as the race progresses. So going downhill now, Parata falling back a little bit from Firestorm. Again, dirty air in these things is a bit difficult to deal with, especially for these faster corners. It becomes less of an issue for the slow corners up here. Just again, keeping one eye on the gap between Coque Lopez and Tyrrell Lightning. That gap around 13-14 seconds now. Lightning's last lap was a 36.2, which compared to Firestorm behind doing the same strategy, it seems, is a 38.3, so 2 seconds faster, and compared to Coque Lopez was 2 seconds slower.
So flicking it through this final sector, here is Williams Koke at the moment. Nice clear track in front of him, and TRL Susu doesn't seem to have the pace to be able to match Koke on this new set of tyres. Through the final corner they go, onto the start-finish straight to start their 8th lap out of 11. So counting down those laps, you can see the traffic in front of them as well in the form of Pirata and Firestorm, so that is in their sights. That'll be a nice little motivator for the drivers as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that TRL Susu is behind in 5th, is also trying to get back into contention with Coco Lopez. Of course, he was ahead of the Spanish driver before the pit stops, but lost out a little bit with the undercut from Lopez a little bit early on, so he'll be trying to get back into contention. He's fallen a little bit further off the back though. He's about 6-7 tenths now off the back of Coco Lopez, but I'm sure we'll see him drill that back end. You see Lopez now being a lot easier on the throttle than he was in qualifying for his section. This is almost flat, it feels like, in qualifying, nowhere near in the race of course, but through here, now we come up to the T10, braking quite late for this because the car has fantastic brakes, and of course you peel off the brakes as you come to the apex, as you see Williams Koke do, because of the downforce of this thing. If you apply the same kind of braking at the start of your braking phase to the end of it, you're going to find yourself rocking up very quickly indeed. So,
a little bit wide there for Koke, isn't he? Yeah, missing the apex going through that corner, so either carrying a bit too much speed in or something along the lines of that, just missing his turning points or something. But regardless, Williams Koke just losing a little bit of time now then to the drivers in front, but TRL Susu also closing up over the last couple, half a lap or so really.
Has Lightning played a blinder here? I'm just thinking, we've got a couple of laps left. We're on lap 9 now, so fast running out of time for people to catch him. Look at that gap behind him.
10.6 seconds. I don't think anyone's going to be able to overhaul that, surely, before the end of this race. 2 laps remaining. It's just not going to be possible, is it?
I mean, stranger things have happened.
And stranger things normally do, Jimmy,
yeah,
as well.
So, that's not to say that, of course, Mikazawa is going to get to the end without having maybe an incident on his own. Those soft tyres will be like driving on ice at the moment, which is a very horrible experience, especially when you're driving a car of this kind of speed. So, time to see just how skilled he is, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely right. Looking here at Firestorm then, who's coming under increasing pressure from Hirata and Williams Koke, as well as Susu, who are trying to find their way past. They're stuck behind them now in this infield section. It's surely only going to be a matter of time. Look at the traction that Koke is able to get out, and look at the track position he's able to get as well around the outside to the left-hander. Yep, thank you very much, he says, and Susu tries to follow him through there as well. He runs out of track. He has a face full of NSX in front of him as well, and now, crucially, is losing time to Williams Koke, who's going to get a couple of positions in the space of a few corners. Up the inside he is, through turn number 10, and second position on the road for Koke.
Yeah, Susu did that to the car behind as well, so he's up into 4th position now, and now he has to deal with Firestorm. Importantly, Williams Adam, there you go behind, he followed through TRL Susu, so these 3 guys on the newer tyres are really cutting through the people who've chosen to do the no-stop. You see how easy it was just to go through, and that is what we might see if the pack catches up to TRL Lightning, but it's 11 seconds now. He's actually pulled away because of the slower traffic there, so I think TRL Lightning has this in the bag and he can bring it home. Yeah, 2 laps now remaining. He's on the penultimate one here for TRL Lightning. This has been an absolutely brilliant race. A great strategy call it's turned out to be as well, and the only way he could pull that off was getting such a commanding lead in the early stages of the race. If he didn't have that, he wasn't able to pull out that advantage. He'd have been up a creek without a paddle. I love your every time they're fantastic, but I honestly think at the moment there's nothing any of these guys can do to catch up to Mick Gazal there at the head of the field. So really it's a battle for second, and at the moment it's Williams Koke Lopez who is leading that. Adam Swillowlow behind TRL Susu, kind of where he started, I think, just trying to find a way by and trying to get another Williams car onto the podium.
So looking here at the Frenchman then, TRL Susu looked pretty promising in the early stages, is holding on to a podium, but he's in the middle of a Williams sandwich at the moment. Is he going to be able to find his way through, or is the Williams car of Williams Adam, this man here we're riding on board with now, going to be able to find his way past as well, flicking it through the right-hander, down in towards that hairpin of turn number 10. That gap is just decreasing ever so slightly as Williams Adam sets a personal best second sector. Good promising pace here from the Briton. Down in towards the right-hander which follows. It's going to be a waiting game, but they're running out of time here.
It's so crazy how quick the laps go by when you're a driver. You're always thinking of the next couple of corners, and before you know it, you're on the last lap. And you have to kind of force your hand. So Susu really needs to try and be close. He'll be thinking about a couple of corners ahead. He wants to try and be close coming into T1. So he'll try and get as close as possible coming through this long right-hander, and then try and use the slipstream down to T1 to force the pass. But look how much the dirty air is interfering with the French driver. He can't get anywhere near the Spaniard.
No, it's really not helping his run at all, and Williams Koke just has enough of a cushion to try and hold enough of an advantage for Williams Susu for TRL Susu rather, I should say, to not get close enough. And this man here, TRL Lightning, well, the gap has come down to just under 9 seconds, but it is still very much enough of an advantage, barring a mistake, an error from TRL Lightning at the moment. It has been a brilliant performance from him, a strategy that was always going to be very risky, and it looks so far to be doing a great job for him and paying off as things stand. Here is Williams Koke though, flicking it through the left-hander in towards the right-hander for the final time. So much pressure he is under from behind with his teammate just a couple of cars back, and he's doing a great job to soak it up, hold those lines really nicely indeed. TRL Susu is the man who looks to be on the back foot here. He's just missing a couple of apexes, running a little bit wide, isn't he?
It's not good enough, I don't think. This is the last chance really to overtake. Coming up the T10, he's far too far back to look at it, although he does trying as close as possible just to let Williams Koke Lopez know that he's there. Not enough though. Meanwhile, at the head of the field, it's looking all gravy for Mick Hazal. He's got a couple more corners to go now, coming up the hill. 8 seconds is the gap between him and Koke Lopez, so unless TRL Lightning spins or makes a mistake, I think this is it for the German driver.
It's been a brilliant performance from him, hasn't it? Williams Koke, though, surely he's going to hold on to second. I don't think there's going to be an opportunity presenting itself for TRL Susu or his fellow Williams teammate, but it's the final corner that Mick Hazal is going through now. What a brilliant result. What a great strategy. A blinding race for TRL Lightning. He takes victory in the top 16 Superstars European Nations Cup race. Koke Lopez, Williams Koke finishes in second, and TRL Susu makes it a double TRL podium in third position. Williams Adam holds on to fourth. A great top five for the Dutchman of Rd.8 BMX as well. A quiet race for Jim Aresi and Fat there in sixth position, but Williams Gio as well. Giorgio Mangano finishing in seventh place after qualifying right at the very back of the grid.
Decent recovery that for Mangano. He won't be happy at that, but he'll be less annoyed than he was after qualifying, I'm sure. But what a race from TRL Lightning, again just showing his knowledge and talent, and beating this field by 7 seconds. I mean, that's going to sting. Amazing.
7 seconds without a pit stop. Let's not forget as well, he was on the softer compound of tyre through the entirety of the race. Williams Koke finishing in second, TRL Susu in third. Firestorm there down in 8th position. Just in front of him was Williams Gio as well. Inside the top 10 was BSR Steven Parata. RC Mura the leader as well. What a disappointing race he had down there in 11th position. Let's not forget he was leading the point standings going into this one as well. I wonder whether that will have turned on its head after this one. Let's have a look, shall we, at the point standings after that top 16 Superstars event and see how it sits. Will it have changed at the top? You bet it has. TRL Lightning now leads the way. 6,251 points compared to RC Mura's 6,165. And RC Mura's got company in the form of two fellow Frenchmen of TRL Susu and also Williams Koke, who are not too far adrift at all.
Yeah, you can see the difference in points awarded there for Lightning. Over 3,000 for Lightning and under 1,000 for Mura. So he'll be kicking himself with that result, which of course elevates the German back to the position he's used to being in.
Absolutely right. Let's have a look from 9th down to 16th position then, shall we? You can see Williams Gio there moves a little bit further up the order, despite that fairly average result, it's got to be said there for the Italian driver. You can see inside the top 10, Rd.8 BMX, TRL Manu Rodri as well. Not a bad result for him considering what happened out on track there today, and you can see further down the order the points disparity just becomes a little bit greater. What an absolutely brilliant Nations Cup we've had for the European region in the top 16 Superstars. The next event will be on the 25th of May. It is going to be an absolute belter. Whatever you do, don't forget to tune in. From Jimmy Broadbent and from myself, Tom Brooks, thanks very much for watching.